Black winter is coming. It will be a very cold winter. A bloody winter. A deadly winter. The weak will disappear. That's just how it is. There's nothing you can do about it. Either you have confidence in yourself and develop your skills, or you lack confidence and you disappear. Today, Burkina Faso is fighting. And what we have understood for the past 3 years now is that we cannot count on anyone. You have to rely on yourself. We don't have to take from anyone. We must rely on ourselves first. If we don't have the ability to bounce back in the face of difficulty, then we don't even deserve to be on this earth.
Hold on, brothers and sisters. In a shocking move, the Prime Minister of Senegal, Ousmane Sonko, has joined Traore. In his speech, Ousmane Sonko has said, Africa has no friend. If you think Africa you have a friend who will help you at difficult time, you must understand this time Africa has no friend. Let me take you to a speech that has sparked and went viral on social media from Senegalese Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko.
We are experiencing rather unusual times, very dark moments, extremely delicate situations whose consequences and implications we must fully consider. For the past 2 days, a war has broken out in the Middle East. We must call it what it is. A war initiated by the United States of America and their Israeli allies. They have chosen to strike a country, namely Iran, and they have triggered that country's response, which has set the entire Gulf region ablaze. We would be very naive to think that it would stop there. We all hope that it doesn't go any further than this. But we must be pessimistic and see things in the most clear-sighted and realistic way possible. A series of military strikes have been carried out, and a significant reaction has consequently been triggered, which could potentially lead to further reactions with other global actors entering the conflict, and perhaps significant ramifications that will extend well beyond this part of the world. It is deeply deplorable and profoundly tragic because at the very core of the matter, we find ourselves in a situation where for over a year now, we have been witnessing with our own eyes the replacement of the global social contract by a return to a primitive state of nature. This involves the systematic dismantling of international law, a world where a country can grant itself the absolute right at any given moment to kidnap individuals without consequence, presidents to attack other countries, to suffocate nations in order to later announce that they will peacefully take possession of them. A country without a UN resolution or mandate can decide to strike other countries, to kill, to assassinate, let's call it what it is, their leaders. This is extremely serious, and the entire balance of the world that has been built over the past 45, even 50 years is now compromised. It is deplorable and must be condemned. I would like to extend our deepest condolences to the family and to the people. Leaders who have been assassinated, Iranian leaders who have been assassinated, and hope that this conflict comes to a swift end for the good of the world. We must consider all the consequences of this conflict which go beyond the purely military aspect. We all know that today traffic around the Strait of Hormuz is compromised, and we know that at least 40% or 30% of the world's oil, of global hydrocarbons, passes through this strait. The economic impacts for all countries, including Senegal, whose consumption of petroleum products depends on this traffic, will be very significant. The consequences more generally for the world economy will be very significant, with impacts on capital mobility, on investment, and the repercussions on all other consumer products. Because you know that everything runs on these hydrocarbon products. Practically, industries, the economy, everything. And so even everyday consumer products, especially food products, basic necessities, all other products will be affected. And all of this because of a unilateral decision by an all-powerful country, no matter how powerful, to start a war, to strike other countries. And that's deplorable. But we need to conduct a geopolitical analysis of these situations. These are not random situations. Just the day before yesterday in the assembly, I spoke to you about the Thucydides trap. I've been talking to you about it for quite some time now. I would like us all to be fully aware of the situation. We have emerging powers grouped around the BRICS, with China as a driving country, which today, whatever is said economically, technologically, and certainly increasingly on the military front, are on the rise. Not only are they catching up on all the delays, but they are also overtaking the old Western world, led by the United States of America. And everything you see is just reactions from this bloc, and especially from the United States, who are afraid of losing the primacy they've held for so long. This overwhelming domination over the rest of the world. And if you look closely at the map of interventions, the goal is to slow down and expel a power like China from South America. First of all, that's why what happened in Venezuela happened, what's currently happening in Cuba, and what could happen elsewhere, since Colombia has also been threatened. This is what's currently happening in the Middle East, where the aim is to effectively cut off all connections these countries have with China, with Russia, and perhaps with other BRICS countries. And the rapprochement over hydrocarbon products, Europe doesn't pose a fundamental problem, since Europe is, at least in this Western bloc, a satellite of the United States. Everything that's happening is an attempt to isolate a rising power, and then to be able to focus specifically on that power, whether in the context of a trade war, which would be fortunate if it were limited to that. We would not wish for it to go much further, especially with powers that possess nuclear arsenals and are mastering increasingly extremely sophisticated technologies. We are in this very particular geopolitical context as far as Africa is concerned, because we've talked about Europe, we've talked about America, we've talked about Asia. And as usual, it is very difficult to talk about Africa, since Africans have never taken responsibility to understand the issues at stake. And to understand that they have no friends, that they have no relatives, and that they must rely on themselves through the necessary reforms, by resolving a number of unnecessary disputes or conflicts, by ensuring stability, but above all by working, by getting to work. We are the continent that is hardly sharpening itself at all on the geopolitical map, but which seems to be the only one unaware of it. And once again, we are caught up in secondary debates that bring nothing to the world, that bring nothing to Africa, and that bring nothing to our countries individually. This Africa that has never truly emerged from under the yoke of colonization, because what is happening now is a kind of reiteration by certain empires of a colonial will. Colonization is not just physical. Even if here we are talking about the physical aspect, there is also this possibility of imposing one's views, one's desires on everyone else, and continuing to dominate the world, to control it, and to treat others as vassals or satellites. That is a form of colonization. Africa has never emerged from this colonization. And I blame myself for that. As proof, what scholars call neo-colonization, through colonial currencies, through the trap of natural resources, but also through the unjust debt imposed on Africa, the extremely difficult conditions for accessing these loans, and all the burdens that places on Africa. Africa has never emerged from this, and the real battles are there, and that's our fight, ours. Unfortunately, sometimes we have, personally I feel, quite isolated in this fight, even here in our own country, Senegal, and now that we are in power. And these are the issues that we need to understand. I want every activist, both men and women, to understand that our struggle goes beyond future and pointless debates about schemes and manipulations, politicians. Mboki Adnobi Jaraswana. We cannot understand this if we cannot understand. Adnobi, in the comments, we know that everything happening right now has an impact on our lives, on our development, and on our laws. Because people don't know it, human beings are predators. The majority of human beings are predators. What is happening now is that people have lost. They have lost their minds. We are standing here today in the village of Yadu in Senegal and in Wofunek, to go and reclaim their colonized minds. We are certainly not men who have simply put themselves at the very head of life. We are not simply men who have chosen to put ourselves at the very head of life through our own will. Instead, we are men who have emerged from a long history of colonization that has shaped our path Today, if we find ourselves asking for help because of the unique challenges of our way of life, and if we ask to truly understand what we can do to reach a certain level of development and stability, we find that we cannot achieve it alone. Senegal is currently facing many deep and difficult problems with the way of life for its people, and we must find a way to overcome these obstacles together. Why did we come here if not to improve it? Like today, we attacked the Reyes, we arrested the president, we took the president of the European Union. We did this so that there would be problems in life. That is why Africa is the only one that cannot take care of itself. Senegal is a country that needs work. We must make a choice, the choice of politics and of a common policy. Are we up to the challenge? We must make the choice for all of Senegal. We need a coalition, a party, a group of people who focus on what is essential. That is what is most important for us. What I mean is that we must rise to the challenge. The stakes are no longer about political maneuvering or politicking. The stakes are no longer about unjustified demands. The church is not able to do things as it wishes. That is why we must fight so that the church can do things. We must fight. Thank you. Thank you. We have done our part so that we can do our part. If we had been able to do our part, we could have done our part. If we had been able to do our part, we could have done our part. If you have any questions, you can go see Russia and Ukraine. I wrote a documentary for you on this subject. In a documentary, there are 850 drones are being sent to Ukraine. We in Senegal cannot take drones and send them abroad. So we know that we exist in the world in power and in freedom. But we must be the center of the world. So we must be in the world. That's what we have learned. We did an introduction to Blenson. We took the framework, set it up, and did a test on nature. The Binuzov Koti, Tei, Akidal, Akitegin, Dahab, Nasolo, Assalamu alaikum.
Africa, the richest continent on Earth, the youngest population on Earth, the most resource-endowed land on Earth, yet the poorest in terms of industrialization, the most indebted, the most externally controlled. And now, a voice rises from West Africa, not whispering, not apologizing, but declaring, Africa has no friends. It must rely on itself. Those were the bold words of Ousmane Sonko, Prime Minister of Senegal. And across the Sahel, another young leader echoes the same call. Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. Two different countries. One message: Africa must wake up. Sonko made a painful observation. We are a continent that practically does not exist on the geopolitical map. Yet we are the only ones unaware of it. Let that sink in. While the United States recalibrates power, while China expands influence, while Russia strengthens alliances, while BRICS nations negotiate new global systems, whereas Africa, invited, photographed, applauded, but rarely decisive. Africa attends global meetings, but does Africa shape global outcomes? That is the uncomfortable question Sonko is forcing us to confront. Colonial flags may have fallen, but colonial systems still standing. Sonko boldly stated that Africa has never truly emerged from colonization. And what does modern colonization look like? Not soldiers in the streets, but monetary dependence, debt traps, raw material export dependency, restrictive IMF conditions, political pressure disguised as partnerships. Modern colonization is subtle. It allows you to raise your flag, but not control your currency. It allows you to elect leaders, but not control your resources. It allows you sovereignty, but not economic independence. And this is exactly what leaders like Traoré have been challenging in the Sahel. The question is no longer about physical occupation. The question is, who controls Africa's decisions? Now, this statement shocks many people. Africa has no friends. Is it anti-West? Is it anti-Est? Is it anti? No. It is pro-African realism. In global politics, there are no permanent friends. There are permanent interests. The US protects American interests. China protects Chinese interests. Russia protects Russian interests. Europe protects European interests. So why does Africa hesitate to protect African interests? Sonko is not saying Africa must isolate itself. He is saying Africa must negotiate from strength. No more dependency. No more begging. No more exporting gold and importing poverty. Here is where this message becomes serious. Because unity slogans are easy, but structural reform, that is hard. Sonko outlined pillars for transformation. Political stability. Africa must stop internal chaos. Coups, tribal conflicts, election violence, these weaken negotiation power. Resolution of internal conflicts. A divided continent cannot command global respect. Economic sovereignty. Control currency. Control minerals. Control value addition. Control energy production. No more exporting raw cocoa and importing chocolate at 5x the price. No more exporting crude oil and importing refined fuel. Culture of work and production. This is crucial. Africa cannot blame external forces forever. We must produce factories, technology hubs, research centers, agro-processing industries. Self-reliance requires discipline. When Sonko's words meet Traoré's actions, something powerful is forming. A new generation of African leadership is emerging. They're not perfect. They face criticism. They face pressure. But they are asking a dangerous question. What if Africa stops waiting for permission? What if Africa trades with itself first? What if Africa finances its own development? What if Africa builds continental defense cooperation? What if Africa treats the African Continental Free Trade Area not as paperwork, but as revolution? This is not anti-anyone. This is pro-dignity. Africa has no friends, maybe. But Africa has something greater. 1.4 billion people, 60% of the world's arable land, critical minerals powering the global green transition. The youngest workforce on Earth. The world does not ignore Africa because it is weak. The world competes for Africa because it is powerful. The only question is, will Africa finally recognize its own power? As Sonko Said, stop the secondary debates. Focus on the strategic future. And as Traoré has signaled, unity is not optional, it is survival. Africa must rely on Africa. If you believe Africa's future is in African hands, type unity in the comments. If you believe Africa must move from speeches to factories, type production. This is not just a video. It is a wake-up call. Africa is not poor. Africa is under-organized. And that can change.
Thank you, Africa.